My name is Emma. I am 32 years old. I live in a small town in the United States. I work at a big superstore. I have two children, Oliver and Mia. My life looks normal from the outside, but inside, my heart feels very tired. When I was 24 years old, I met a man named Daniel. He was tall and handsome. He had a bright smile. His eyes were kind. He made me laugh. He made me feel like I was the most important woman in the world. Daniel said sweet things to me. He said I was beautiful. He said he wanted to build a family with me. I believed every word. After 1 year, Daniel asked me to marry him. I said yes without thinking too much. I thought, this is love. This is forever. My parents were a little worried. They told me, Emma, take your time. But I didn't listen. I loved Daniel too much. I thought love was enough. At the start, our life was good. We lived in a small apartment. We cooked dinner together. We watched movies on the sofa. We laughed at silly jokes. I was happy. A few months after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I was so happy. Daniel seemed happy too. He kissed my stomach and said, I can't wait to meet our baby. But slowly, Daniel started to change. He came home late from work. He stopped talking to me kindly. He looked tired and angry most of the time. I thought, maybe he is stressed. Maybe he just needs some time. When Oliver was born, I cried happy tears. He was a beautiful baby boy with dark hair like his father. I wanted Daniel to be proud. I wanted him to hold Oliver close. But Daniel did not show much love. He held Oliver once, took a picture, and then said, I'm tired. I need to rest. I stayed up at night, rocking Oliver to sleep. I changed all the diapers. I cleaned the house. I cooked meals. Daniel sat on the sofa, watching sports or playing games on his phone. Sometimes I asked for help. He would say, You are the mom. You take care of it. Those words hurt me, but I stayed quiet. I thought, if I work harder, he will love me again. 2 years later, I had Mia, another beautiful baby. She had big brown eyes and a soft smile. Daniel didn't even come to the hospital when she was born. He said he was busy with work. I held my newborn daughter alone and cried. When Daniel finally visited, he stayed only 15 minutes. He brought no flowers, no smile, just a tired face and a quick kiss on my forehead. At home, life got harder. Daniel spent more time outside. He worked late. Sometimes he stayed out all night. He said he was with friends. I believed him because I wanted to. I didn't want to see the truth. One night, Oliver had a high fever. I called Daniel many times. He didn't answer. I took Oliver to the hospital alone. I held his small hand the whole time. I was scared but I stayed strong. Daniel came home the next morning. He didn't ask about Oliver. He just said, "I'm tired. Don't bother me." I felt a deep pain in my heart, but I told myself, "Stay strong, Emma. Stay for the kids." Every morning I woke up early. I made breakfast for Oliver and Mia. I packed their school bags. I went to work at the superstore. I stocked shelves. I smiled at customers. I cleaned floors. When I came home, I cooked dinner, helped with homework, gave the kids a bath, and cleaned the house. Daniel did nothing. He sat on the sofa, drinking beer, playing on his phone. Sometimes I tried to talk to him. I said, "Daniel, I feel lonely. Can we talk?" He said, "You complain too much. You are never happy." I said, "Can we go to Oliver's school event together?" He said, "You go. I'm busy." His words cut me like a knife, but I smiled for my kids. I smiled even when my heart was breaking. One Saturday, I planned a family picnic. I packed sandwiches and fruits. I packed a blanket and some toys. I wanted us to have a happy day. Daniel didn't want to go. He said, "I don't have time for silly things." I took the kids alone to the park. We laughed. We played ball. We watched the clouds in the sky. But inside, I felt a hole in my heart. Oliver asked, "Why didn't Daddy come, Mommy?" I said, "Daddy is working hard, sweetie." I lied because I didn't want them to feel sad. At night, I sometimes cried in the bathroom. I didn't want the children to hear me. One night, I found an old picture of Daniel and me. We were young and smiling. I touched the picture and whispered, "Where did that love go?" But deep inside, I knew the answer. Maybe Daniel never truly loved me. Maybe he only loved the idea of me. Maybe he never wanted this life. Still, I stayed. I stayed for Oliver and Mia. I stayed because I didn't want them to feel broken. I told myself, I can take the pain. I am strong. I will protect them. But each day my heart grew heavier. Each day, my smile became harder to wear. One evening, as I cleaned the kitchen, Daniel said coldly, "You are not the woman I married." I looked at him. I wanted to scream, "Of course I am not. I am tired. I am lonely. I am fighting for a family alone." But I said nothing. I just wiped my hands on a towel and kept cleaning. Later that night, I sat by the window. The stars were shining. The world was sleeping. I whispered to myself, "Is this really my life? Is this really love?" I didn't know the answer, but one thing was clear. Daniel had only pretended to love me, and I had stayed, hoping it would become real one day. Before I share the rest of my story, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? It gives me strength to know someone is hearing my words. someone who understands me. Please tell me in the comments. I would really love to know. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. I stayed. I stayed because I thought it was the right thing. I told myself, one day he will change. One day he will love us the way we deserve. But that day never came. Daniel grew colder. He hardly spoke to me. When he did, it was only to complain. One evening, Oliver got an award at school. He won Best Reader in his class. Oliver was so proud. He made a small card for Daniel. It said, "I love you, Dad." That night, Oliver gave Daniel the card. Daniel looked at it for a second and said, "That's nice," then put it on the table and went back to his phone. Oliver's little face fell. I saw it. My heart broke. I hugged Oliver tightly and said, "I'm so proud of you, baby." That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone. I stared at the little card. It was still sitting there, forgotten. I thought, what am I teaching my children by staying? But still, I stayed. At work, I wore a smile. I stocked the shelves. I helped customers. Inside, I felt empty. One of my coworkers, Maria, noticed. She said, "Emma, are you okay? You look tired." I smiled and said, "I'm fine, just busy with the kids." I never told anyone the truth. I carried my sadness like a heavy backpack. One afternoon, I was working in the cleaning aisle. My manager came over and said, "Emma, you have been working so hard. Thank you." I smiled politely, but inside I thought, no one knows how hard I am fighting. One rainy evening, Daniel came home angry. He threw his keys on the table and said, "What is this mess?" Mia's backpack was on the floor. Some crayons were on the couch. I said, "I was helping Mia with her homework. I'll clean up now." He shook his head and said, "You can't even keep the house clean. What do you do all day?" His words were sharp like knives. I wanted to scream, "I work! I take care of the kids! I clean! I do everything!" But I stayed silent. I picked up the crayons and put the backpack away. That night, when Daniel was asleep, I sat in the living room. The rain tapped against the windows. I felt tired of pretending. I looked at our wedding photo. It was dusty, forgotten, like our love. I whispered, "Is this all there is?" The next morning, Daniel left early. No goodbye. No kiss. I made breakfast for Oliver and Mia. Pancakes with little smiley faces. They laughed and said, "Thanks, Mommy." Their laughter was like music. It gave me strength. After dropping them at school, I drove to work. The sky was gray. My heart felt the same. At the superstore, I met a new worker. His name was Chris. He was friendly and kind. He said, "You have a beautiful smile, Emma. You should smile more often." I thanked him and quickly walked away. It felt strange to hear something kind. I wasn't used to kindness anymore. Weeks passed. Chris became a friend. He always said hello. He always asked, "How are you today?" It felt good to be seen, to be heard. One evening, after work, Maria invited me for coffee. I said yes. I needed to feel like a real person again, not just a wife and a mother. At the coffee shop, Maria said, "Emma, you deserve to be happy too." Her words hit me hard. Happy? I almost forgot what happiness felt like. I went home that night and sat by the window. The stars were out again. I thought about my children. I thought about my life. Was I really doing the right thing by staying? Was I showing them that love was cold and silent? Another month passed. Daniel forgot my birthday. There was no card, no hug, no happy birthday. I cooked dinner as usual. I put the kids to bed. I cleaned the kitchen. I sat alone in the dark. I whispered, "Happy birthday, Emma," to myself. The next day, Maria surprised me with a small cupcake and a candle at work. She said, "Make a wish." I closed my eyes. I wished for strength. I wished for peace. I didn't wish for Daniel to love me anymore. I knew that wish was already dead. One Sunday morning, Daniel left early. He said he was going fishing with friends. I spent the day with Oliver and Mia. We painted pictures. We baked cookies. We laughed. I felt happy. That night, I tucked them into bed. I kissed their soft cheeks. I whispered, "You are loved." Ways. Then I sat at the kitchen table again. Daniel came home late. He smelled like beer. He didn't look at me. He went straight to bed. I stayed in the kitchen for a long time. I looked around the small house. I thought about all the years I gave. I thought about all the smiles I forced, all the tears I hid, all the times I stayed silent. And I thought about my children. I wanted them to see real love, not pretend love. I wanted them to know that love is kind. Love is warm. Love makes you feel safe. Daniel didn't love me. Maybe he never really did. Maybe he only loved himself. I realized something important that night. I deserved better. Not just for me, but for Oliver and Mia. They deserved to see their mother happy. They deserve to see what real love looks like. I wiped my tears. I stood up. And for the first time in a long time, I started to imagine a different life. A life without pretending. A life where I could breathe again. A life where love was real. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I had to find it. Not just for me, but for them. The days went by, but nothing changed. Daniel was still cold and distant. He barely spoke to me unless it was to complain. I cooked, cleaned, worked, and cared for the kids, but he never seemed happy. I often sat by the window at night asking myself, is this really the life I want? Oliver and Mia were growing fast. They needed love, attention, and smiles. I tried to give them everything, even when my heart felt heavy. I didn't want them to see my sadness. I didn't want them to feel that love was cold and empty. One evening, Oliver had a small play at school. He had worked hard to learn his lines. He asked Daniel to come and watch. Daniel said he was too tired. I saw the sadness in Oliver's eyes, but he said nothing. I sat in the school hall alone, clapping and smiling for my son. I told him afterward, "You were amazing. I'm so proud of you." But inside my heart broke. When we got home, Daniel was sitting on the sofa watching TV. He didn't ask about the play. He didn't ask about Oliver. I put the kids to bed and sat alone in the kitchen, thinking about how many moments Daniel had already missed. The next morning, I went to work early. Maria, my friend at the superstore, noticed I was quiet. She made me a cup of coffee and said softly, "Emma, you deserve to be happy too." I smiled and thanked her, but my chest felt tight. Maybe I had forgotten what happiness even looked like. At home, nothing got better. Daniel became even more distant. Sometimes he didn't come home at night. When I asked where he was, he would get angry. "Stop asking stupid questions," he said. I learned to stay silent. It was easier than fighting. One Saturday afternoon, the kids and I made cookies together. We laughed and made a mess in the kitchen. Oliver put too much flour in the bowl. Mia covered her nose in chocolate. We were happy, just the three of us. Daniel came home and saw the mess. He didn't smile. He just said, "You're teaching them to be lazy." His words stung, but I didn't answer. I cleaned the kitchen quietly while the kids played. I thought, I can't let his anger steal these small moments of joy. That night, after everyone slept, I sat in the living room and thought about my life. I thought about the dreams I once had. I wanted a loving family. I wanted a kind husband. I wanted a warm home. But what I had was a man who didn't even see me anymore. The next day, Daniel left early again without saying anything. The kids and I went to the park. The sun was shining. We played on the swings. We shared ice cream. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. I felt free. I realized something important. I could be happy without Daniel. I could give my children a good life, even if he wasn't part of it. When we got home, I put the kids to bed. I sat in the quiet house and made a decision. I wasn't going to live like this anymore. I wasn't going to stay invisible. I wasn't going to teach my children that love looked like this. A few weeks later, I found a small apartment for rent near the kids' school. It was tiny, but it was clean and full of light. I signed the papers. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't want another fight. I wanted peace. The night before we moved, I packed our clothes into boxes. I packed their toys, their books, and their favorite blankets. I didn't pack sadness. I didn't pack fear. I left those behind. When Daniel came home that night, he didn't notice anything. He didn't ask why some things were missing. He just went straight to the TV. The next morning when he left for work, I loaded the car. Oliver and Mia thought we were going on an adventure. In a way, we were. We were starting a new life. When we arrived at our new home, the kids ran inside. They laughed and explored every room. I stood in the middle of the living room and smiled. It wasn't a big house, but it was ours. It was full of hope. That evening, we ate sandwiches on the floor because we didn't have a table yet. We laughed about it. Oliver said, "This is fun." Mia said, "It feels like a picnic." Their smiles made everything worth it. Daniel called later that night. He shouted, asking where we were. I held the phone away from my ear. I calmly said, "We are safe. Please don't call again unless it's about the children." Then I hung up. I sat by the window and watched the stars. I didn't cry. I didn't feel fear. I felt strong. I had made the hardest choice of my life, but it was the right one. Days turned into weeks. We bought a second-hand table. We put up the kids' drawings on the walls. We made new memories. There was laughter in the house again. There was music. There was peace. At bedtime, Mia hugged me and said, "Mommy, I love our new home." Oliver nodded and said, "It feels warm here." I kissed them and said, "It feels warm because of you two." Sometimes when I thought about the past, I felt sad. I remembered the girl who believed in Daniel's promises. I remembered the woman who waited for him to love her back. But then I looked around at our little home. I saw two smiling children. I saw a woman who had learned to choose herself. Daniel pretended to love me, but I learned to love myself. And that made all the difference. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. More emotional and inspiring stories are coming soon.